Picture this. The year is 2015. A foreign billionaire stands on the Las Vegas Strip, points at a patch of dirt, and tells the world he is going to build the most expensive, most exclusive, most jaw-dropping casino resort in the history of this city. The press goes wild. Vegas goes wild. Everyone goes wild. Fast forward just a few years later, and that same patch of dirt has a rusting, half-built skeleton rotting on it like a carcass in the Nevada sun. Nobody got their dream casino. Nobody got their money back. And almost nobody is talking about it. Hi, my name is Michael, and this is Old Vegas Legends. Who is James Packer? To understand how this disaster happened, you first have to understand the man at the center of it. Because James Packer is not just some lucky rich kid who stumbled into the casino business. He is the product of one of the most powerful media and entertainment dynasties in Australian history. His father, Kerry Packer, was the kind of man Las Vegas was built for. Kerry was a legendary high roller. We are talking about a man who would fly into Las Vegas in the 1980s and 1990s and drop tens of millions of dollars at the baccarat tables like most of us, drop $20 on a Friday night. The casinos loved him. They feared him. They bent rules for him. Kerry Packer was not a guest. He was a force of nature. And when Kerry died in 2005, he left his son James a media empire worth billions and an impossible legacy to live up to. Now, here is where it gets psychologically interesting. And I say this with genuine empathy, not cruelty. James Packer spent a significant portion of his adult life trying to be his father. Bigger deals, bolder bets, more spectacular risks. Kerry conquered the baccarat table. James wanted to own the whole building. That hunger, that need to outrun his father's shadow, is critical context for everything that follows. Because the Crown Las Vegas project was never purely a business decision. It was a statement. It was James Packer planting a flag on the most famous boulevard in the world and saying, "Look what I built, Dad." He had already built Crown Resorts into a genuine international casino powerhouse with properties in Melbourne and Perth. He had credibility. He had capital. And he had an obsession with Las Vegas that went back decades. So when the opportunity presented itself, he did not walk through the door, kicked it clean off the hinges. The dream, Crown Las Vegas. Let me paint you the picture that Packer sold to the world, because it was genuinely breathtaking. Crown Las Vegas was not going to be just another casino. That was the whole point. Packer looked at the Strip in 2014 and 2015, and he saw what a lot of sharp observers were already seeing. The middle market was getting squeezed to death. The budget traveler was being nickel and dimed into misery. But at the very top, at the absolute apex of luxury, there was still a gap, a genuine opening for something that made even the win look modest. His answer was a 67-story glass tower that would rise above everything on the northern end of the Strip. Now stop and think about that for a second. 67 stories on the Las Vegas Strip. And when this thing was going to be visible from the moon, the renderings were extraordinary, floor-to-ceiling glass. A sleek, tapered silhouette that looked less like a casino and more like something you would see in Dubai or Singapore. The kind of building that makes architects cry happy tears. But here is the twist that made this project genuinely different from everything else on the Strip. Crown Las Vegas was going to be a non-gaming resort. No slot machines humming away on the main floor. No rows of video poker terminals stretching into the distance. Packer's vision was pure luxury hospitality. Ultra-high-end hotel rooms, world-class restaurants, a spa that would make Beverly Hills jealous, and a private gaming salon tucked away for the ultra-wealthy clientele he planned to fly in from Asia and the Middle East. The budget was announced at $1.7 billion. The press coverage was rapturous. Headlines called it the future of Las Vegas. Industry insiders called it visionary. Even the skeptics had to admit the renderings looked absolutely stunning. This was going to be the jewel of the modern Strip, a monument to what Vegas could be when it stopped chasing the middle and started chasing the clouds. And for about 18 months, the whole city believed it. The warning signs nobody wanted to see. Here's the part of the story where, if you watch enough of these videos, you start to recognize the pattern, because there were red flags. There were always red flags. We just did not want to look at them. Start with the land. Packer's company acquired a prime parcel on the north end of the Strip, specifically on the site of the old New Frontier Hotel. Now the New Frontier had its own complicated history, but that is a story for another day. The point is, the land acquisition itself raised eyebrows. The price paid was aggressive. The zoning requirements for a structure of this scale were complex, and the timeline from purchase to groundbreaking was moving at a pace that made experienced Las Vegas developers quietly shake their heads. Then there was the budget problem. $1.7 billion sounds like an enormous sum, and it is. But anyone who has built anything of genuine luxury scale in Las Vegas will tell you that number was optimistic to the point of fantasy. Steve Wynn spent $1.6 billion on the Wynn Las Vegas back in 2005. That was 20 years ago. Its construction costs had not gone down in the intervening 2 decades. They had gone dramatically up. Industry veterans who looked at Packer's announced budget and compared it to the scope of his vision did some quick back-of-the-napkin math and came up with numbers that were 2, sometimes 3 times higher than what Crown was publicly projecting. And then, and this is the one that should have set off every alarm in the building, James Packer had never built a major casino resort in the United States before. Not one. His Australian properties were impressive. His management team was capable. But American construction regulations, American union requirements, American gaming licensing procedures, these are not things you learn on the job when you are spending billions of dollars. But this was not a man who had navigated the labyrinth of Nevada gaming authorities before. This was a newcomer with a very large checkbook and a very grand vision stepping into an extraordinarily complicated arena. But nobody wanted to hear that. The renderings were too beautiful. The story was too good. And in Las Vegas, a good story has always been worth more than a sound business plan, at least until the bill comes due. The construction begins, and then stops. Ground was broken in 2015, and for a brief, shining moment, it looked real. There was a ceremony. There were hard hats and speeches and photographs. The tower began to rise, steel and concrete climbing above the desert floor, exactly as promised. And then it stopped. Not with a bang, not with a dramatic announcement. It just stopped. The way things die in corporate America, quietly and with a lot of carefully worded press releases that say absolutely nothing. By 2016, construction had been suspended. The official explanations from Crown Resorts were vague to the point of comedy. They cited a need to reassess the project scope. They talked about reviewing the development timeline. One statement used the phrase evolving market conditions, which in my experience is corporate language for, we have a serious problem, and we would prefer not to discuss it in public. What was left on that prime strip real estate was a partially built foundation and a construction site that sat frozen in time like some kind of billionaire-scale science experiment. Cranes idle, equipment gathering dust, workers gone. Just a concrete skeleton standing there in the Nevada sun. A monument to ambition that ran headfirst into reality. Now, here is the part that still gets me. This was happening on the Las Vegas Strip. One of the most photographed, most visited, most scrutinized pieces of real estate on the entire planet. There was no hiding this. Every tourist who walked past could see it. Every industry insider knew what a frozen construction site meant. And yet, the story somehow did not explode the way you would expect. There was no front page reckoning. No serious forensic accounting in the mainstream press. It was treated more like an awkward footnote than the catastrophic failure it actually was. I genuinely cannot explain that. Other than to say that when enough money is involved, the media tends to develop a very convenient case of selective vision. A personal collapse behind the financial collapse. Now, I want to be careful here, because what happened next in James Packer's life is not something I am going to use as a punchline. I have too much respect for the subject of mental health to do that. Around the same period that Crown Las Vegas was falling apart, James Packer himself was going through a very public and clearly very painful personal unraveling. He stepped back from his role at Crown Resorts. He retreated almost entirely from public life. There were reports of serious mental health struggles. People close to him described a man who was exhausted, overwhelmed, and fundamentally changed from the driven dealmaker who had launched the Vegas project with such spectacular confidence. What I will say is this: there is something deeply human and deeply recognizable in what happened to Packer. Here was a man who had spent decades trying to build something worthy of a legendary father's name, who had poured not just money, but genuine personal identity into a project that was supposed to define his legacy. And when it collapsed, it was not just a financial loss, it was something much more personal than that. The business press covered the Crown Las Vegas failure almost entirely as a financial story. Balance sheets, write-downs, shareholder losses. And yes, we are going to get to those numbers, and they are genuinely staggering. But if you only look at the spreadsheet, you miss the actual human story underneath it. And that human story, a son chasing a father's ghost across the Nevada desert, and is one of the most classically Las Vegas stories I have ever come across. Because this city has always been built as much on psychology as it has been on money. The $4 billion hole. All right, let us talk about the money, because the numbers here are not just large. They are the kind of large that requires you to sit down before reading them. The total financial damage from the Crown Las Vegas disaster, when you add up the land acquisition costs, the pre-development expenses, the actual construction costs before the halt, the write-downs taken by Crown Resorts, and the subsequent sale of the property at a price dramatically below what was invested, lands somewhere in the range of $4 billion in total value destruction. $4 billion. With a B, Crown Resorts took enormous write-downs on the project. Of course, the land was eventually sold. The partially built structure was eventually dealt with. But the shareholders of Crown Resorts, many of them ordinary Australian investors who had trusted the company with their retirement savings, absorbed losses that are difficult to fully comprehend. And here is the detail that I think deserves more attention than it ever received. The $4 billion figure does not even include the opportunity cost. That land sat effectively dormant for years during which the Las Vegas property market was appreciating at a significant rate, years during which a competently executed project on that same parcel could have been generating revenue, creating jobs, and building genuine value. The cost of what did not get built is arguably as significant as the cost of what was attempted and abandoned. Yeah, $4 billion. Enough to have built the resort Packer originally envisioned, probably twice over, if the planning, the budgeting, and the execution had been handled with the discipline the scale of the project demanded. It is enough money to make your head spin. And it is enough money that you have to ask a genuinely uncomfortable question. How does something this large, this visible, and this expensive fail, this completely with so little accountability and so little public reckoning? That is not a rhetorical question, by the way. I would genuinely love to know the answer. What it became, and what it says about Vegas. The land did not stay empty forever. Eventually it was acquired, dealt with, repositioned. The skeleton was addressed. The strip moves on. It always moves on. Imad, that is one of the things that is both miraculous and slightly terrifying about Las Vegas. It has an extraordinary capacity to absorb failure, bury it under fresh concrete, and keep the neon lights burning like nothing ever happened. But here is what the Crown Las Vegas disaster actually tells us about this city in the modern era. It tells us that the Las Vegas Strip is no longer a place where vision alone is enough. It used to be. Steve Wynn had vision. Howard Hughes had vision. Jay Sarno had vision. And in the era when this city was being built by individuals with genuine skin in the game and genuine personal accountability, vision was often enough to carry a project through. Because the person with the vision was the same person who would be personally destroyed if the project failed. The Crown Las Vegas disaster is a product of a different era, an era of corporate structures and financial engineering and offshore holding companies that insulate the decision makers from the full consequences of their decisions. Packer lost money, yes. He lost enormous amounts of money, but the structural complexity of modern billionaire finance means that the losses were distributed, written off, and ultimately absorbed in ways that a small contractor or a local union worker or an ordinary Crown Resorts shareholder simply cannot access. This is the pattern we see again and again on the modern strip. The people who make the decisions are rarely the people who bear the consequences. And until that changes, we are going to keep seeing beautiful renderings, premature groundbreakings, and frozen cranes standing in the Nevada desert, like monuments to a dream that never quite made it off the drawing board. So, what is the final lesson of James Packer and the $4 billion Las Vegas disaster that nobody talks about? It is the same lesson that the Mirage teaches us, the same lesson that the Rio teaches us, the same lesson that every broken elevator at the Excalibur and every cold automated kiosk where a smiling human being used to stand is trying to tell us. Las Vegas was built by people who were genuinely, personally, almost irrationally committed to the dream they were building, and it is being unmade piece by piece, project by project, by people who see it as a financial instrument rather than a human experience. James Packer wanted to build something extraordinary. I actually believe that. Yeah, somewhere underneath the corporate structure and the billionaire ambition and the psychological complexity of a son chasing his father's legacy, there was a genuine love for what Las Vegas could be at its absolute best. And that makes the failure sadder, not less significant. The patch of dirt where Crown Las Vegas was supposed to rise is still there, still waiting, still absorbing the heat of the Nevada sun. $4 billion worth of what could have been, buried in the desert like so many other Vegas dreams before it. If you are new here, my name is Michael, and this is Old Vegas Legends. We tell the stories this city would prefer you forgot. Subscribe if you want to keep hearing them, and leave a comment below, telling me which Vegas disaster you think deserves its own forensic autopsy. Because I promise you. We are just getting started. Until next time, watch your wallet, and watch where they are pointing those cranes. They are pointing those cranes. They are pointing those